lately I've been thinking uh, about Mars and about space, and I was watching some videos for fun about the ISS, the International Space Station, and I began to brainstorm. Thinking about things that I used to think about a lot when I was a kid, about about Mars. I mean, usually when I was a kid, at least, they pretty much told you that there were 9 planets, and Pluto was a planet. Things have changed, and they really didn't discover any other planets that were worthwhile, that were Earth-like, and we were pretty much taught that Mars is a planet that is too cold for anybody to live there. There's no air. You'll die immediately when you land. But then I started brainstorming because I hear a little bit about how we're going to go to Mars soon, and I'm beginning to think to myself, what would it really take to live on Mars? I mean, how much different is it? So I went and I think I'm going to do the research not right now with you guys. In fact, let's see here. Let's do some research together. All right. So the first question I had is I wanted to ask myself, and I just asked the first question so far: Earth versus Mars atmosphere. So it says Mars is about half the size of Earth in diameter. That doesn't really mean anything. I do know that. So there's no oxygen. Okay, that's the problem. There's no oxygen on Earth. There's about, I think, something like 1%. Let's see what it says here. It says, if it loads. Okay. It says Mars is about half the size. Okay, it's here. It is right up here. So we got, okay. So it says here Earth has 20% oxygen, and here a little sliver has oxygen, and it's mainly carbon dioxide, CO2. How much CO2 do we have? Carbon dioxide is that little sliver. So I'm going to say, I don't know. I'm thinking to myself, like, what would throw this into balance? Okay, so I know one thing in general, that plants love CO2. So like, if you put a plant there, let's just imagine it was a plant on Mars. The the plant would love that CO2. 96% CO2, carbon dioxide. So I'm assuming that Mars has enough CO2 almost to the level of how much we would love oxygen. Now, us as humans, if we have too much oxygen, the I think we would also die too. We only have 20% oxygen in the on Earth. So I'm assuming if we had 96% oxygen, we would pretty much get lightheaded and die. What else? Well, let's just go down this path for fun. So let's pretend that plants love CO2. Okay. There might be something underlying that's scientific that I'm not really sure about, where it might actually need other, like oxygen too. But let's just say CO2 for a moment. So my next question is, okay, so you put a plant there, it needs water, right? But plants breathe in CO2 and exhale oxygen, right? So here we have a world with no oxygen. You put the plant on there, isolated, without any other, characteristics or variables that we're going to introduce to this. It'll exhale oxygen. Therefore, if we somehow cover this whole entire planet with plants, it would be breathing out oxygen. I would imagine that plants would grow like a wildfire. Now, water. So from my understanding, if you exhale CO2 and you have more of an oxygen level, water, you need hydrogen too to make water. But how much hydrogen does it have? I mean, water vapor. So, I mean, hydrogen would have to get introduced somehow. But I have the feeling once hydrogen is introduced, it'll stay there, but maybe the atmosphere will carry it away. All right, so that's just one thought process. Okay, so plants, maybe they'll blow up with all the CO2 and it'll grow and produce all this oxygen, but that's one way of getting oxygen. A lot of issues they have to get worked out. I mean, even if you take a plant, how are you going to get your very first plant to grow? The temperature. All right, so let's go into temperature. Let's think about this for a moment. A lot of the stuff that I read about when it comes down to space, they're always talking about negative 250 degrees, positive 250 degrees. In other words, when you're in the sun, it's positive 250 degrees. Fahrenheit, they might say, or Celsius even. Celsius, I think they say. And then if you're in the shade, it's negative 250 degrees. So let's see, what is the temperature on Mars? Temp of Mars. I think they're going to say something like, the average temperature of Mars is at minus 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, that's deadly cold. Minus 60 degrees Celsius in the winter. Okay, minus 80 degrees. Minus 80 degrees, I mean, I feel like that's workable. In winter near the poles, temperature goes to 195. The Curiosity measured air temperature as high as 43 degrees Fahrenheit, 6 degrees. So that 43 degrees Fahrenheit is actually pretty warm, you know. So I would say almost like when you're in the sun on Mars, it's almost equivalent to like maybe the worst place on Earth when it comes down to how cold it is. 195 degrees sure is terribly cold, but I'm going to assume that that's workable. I mean, there's places in Antarctica and like Yakutsk, Russia. They have temperatures of like minus 40 degrees. You know, they've have records that they've broken. You know, so the temperature is actually workable, believe it or not. I mean, you know, you could probably grow or go in an area where, you know, you're near the equator of Mars and it might be warmer there. But I just couldn't. I could see how scientifically, in the long run, things could balance out with the CO2 O2 aspect if you add hydrogen. But how feasible is to add hydrogen on an entire planet, except for producing it somehow? The other thing is, what plant would grow at that temperature on its own? You know, like you think about Earth, all the places that are like 43 degrees or lower are pretty much barren areas, rocky, no plants. Very few plants would grow there, you know, in such a cold place that we could just transplant there. I would imagine we'd have to maybe you know, utilize our expertise in genetics. Maybe try to produce a plant that could survive really low temperatures. You know, and then we could have some fun making a plant like that. The other thing is, you might want to if we could genetically do that. I don't know how extensive our genetic you know, skill set is with making things from scratch or what. But I would imagine you have to make a plant that can survive really cold temperatures, extremely green, where it could absorb nitrogen from the sun very efficiently because there's very little sunlight there. There's less sunlight, I might say. Take that, convert it to nitrogen, and inject it into the soil. And then when those plants die, it'll create a bed. It would be sad to be a mono species. Like, you don't want to monocrop the entire planet of Mars, you know. But I would imagine very green, heavy, nitrogen heavy plants. 2 or 3 of them. It'll monocrop the planet. I'm sure they're not going to invent more than 1 or 2, you know, different species. And I guess it has to start with experiments. I guess when the scientists go there, the astronauts, as you might say, they'll experiment a little bit, just a little bit of stuff to talk about, to think about it. That's why I made this video, is just to think about it. You know, it's fun just to explore these ideas about Mars. I'm sorry if this video is boring. I just wanted to have some fun, you know, talking about Mars. All right, thank you. All right, bye bye now.